Hello friends on YouTube, this is Nathan Lawrence, Good News Tree Service in Wilsonville, Oregon. And thank you for joining me, and I'm happy that I can have the privilege of showcasing to you some of my fall pine pruning activities here in northwestern Oregon. It is the fall, it's the middle of November, and I've just gotten finished pruning a number of pine trees out for this one client of mine. Almost all of them are coast pines, but there's one Japanese black pine, Pinus thunbergii, which we will look at a little bit later. And these pine trees, this is the second time I have pruned them. The first time was this spring, about 6 months ago, and we've got one right here. And these trees were very, very thick. They had been pruned previously by somebody else over the years, but not properly. They were pruned in a basic Japanese style, kind of a Sukashi branching style, but they had not been pruned properly in the spring pruning with the candle pruning, basically cutting back the candles, and then some thinning, and then in the fall cutting back candles that needed to be cut and leave the ones that came up in the summertime so we can improve the ramification, the spreading out of the branches into planes. And also in this fall time, we're cutting back dead branches, dead twigs, anything that died during the hot summer, anything that maybe didn't produce the type of buds that I wanted or candles that I wanted that were growing in the right direction. And of course, there's always some thinning and that kind of thing. So anyway, these trees I've been doing restorative pruning for the last 6 months. And so now this is the second pruning of this year, the fall pruning. And so I'm happy to share that with you. And I've got some video to show you kind of before and after, and then as well as a little instructional video on fall pruning, in this case on the Japanese black pine, which is behind this house on the other side. So let me just say this, that I've got to try to be humble about this. I am an excellent aesthetic pruner. I've been pruning trees for money for 50 years and pine trees as well. But the pruning of pine trees in the Japanese Sukashi style is an art and a science all of its own. It is really, I've been a professional pruner and arborist, like I say, for 50 years, or been pruning money for 50 years. And I've had a commercial tree service for nearly 40 years. So that's what I've made my living doing full time. But I don't consider my skills and my understanding to be anywhere near that of a Japanese trained master pruner craftsman. Let's just be honest about that. I think I do good work, but it's very difficult for Americans or people outside of Japan to learn this art. Many people think that they can, and with a lot of hard work, a lot of reading, a lot of studying, a lot of trial and error, maybe watching videos, and there aren't even that many good videos out there on YouTube and other video platforms that teach you how to do this. But with a lot of hard work, it can come together for a person and they can begin to learn this amazing art. That's the reason I say I don't feel that I hold a candle to the Japanese craftsman. And at this point, I'm going to change to another tree for another background as I continue this. And in this way, you'll have a chance to see several of the trees I've been working on. But I've been doing restorative or rehabilitative pruning, so these trees are not where eventually I want them to be, but this is a big step in the right direction. Some of these trees, when I started 6 months ago, were so thick that you could not even see through them. Light would not penetrate, or very little light. So I've been opening them up, as you can see on this coast pine here, this Pinus contorta. and we're starting to get some more ramification, and anyway, it's moving in the right direction. But the reason that I say that I don't feel that I hold a candle to the Japanese trained, mentored aesthetic pruners in Japan is because these individuals are they're the beneficiaries of a long tradition that has been passed on down from mentor to disciple, mentor to the person working under them, that they have been training and passing this knowledge down for 1,300 years, since about the 8th century. And the Japanese got it from the Buddhist, the Chinese Buddhists that immigrated into Japan around that time. So around the 1300s, it might have been before, but that's as far back as the records go. Now I'm going to switch to another tree so you can see that one. So I'm kind of switching from tree to tree here so you can kind of get a sense of what I'm doing. But anyway, those of us here in the West, we don't have that long tradition of this knowledge, this craft, this science, this art being passed on down from generation to generation. So we do the best that we can here to replicate what I consider to be the Japanese, who are the best pruners on the earth, next to the Chinese before them. And so we're learning to try to do the best we can. So anyway, with that in mind, let's go take a look at some of these trees that I've recently done. And I hope that maybe something that I've said here and some of the information that I give might be helpful to some of you watching these videos, and maybe you can learn something that will help you to take better care of your pine trees. All right, thank you so much, and let's go to the next phase of this video. So I initially pruned this pine tree out about 6 months ago in the spring. It was so thick that you could not see the light through it. It was like a dome. I heavily thinned it out this spring, about 6 months ago, and the tree responded very nicely, and it's got good color, and it grew a lot of candles. The candles are all about 6 to 8 inches long. And now it's the fall, it's in early November, and now I'm beginning to thin it out even more. Full Japanese black pine, Pinus thunbergii, and I pruned it out this spring about 6 months ago. It is now the fall in early November, and this tree has performed very well. It had not been pruned professionally in a number of years, and I came in and really opened it up and layered it and thinned it out in the spring, like I say, about 6 months ago. And I thought I'd kind of make a video as to how I'm what my thought processes are as I'm pruning this in a Sukashi Japanese style. So I'm going to take each branch at a time. I don't know how this is going to show up on the video. I don't have somebody to work the camera here, but right now I am looking for ramification. I'm looking to see how it budded out. And so I'm cutting off dead stuff. I'm cutting off buds that are growing back into the tree. We want everything to kind of grow out, up and out. A few things going down, but mostly up and out. And so I'm going through each group of needles, and cutting out little branchlets that did not perform, that did not put out a bud, and therefore they're going to probably end up dying. So I cut those off. There's no live bud on it. then it comes off, and I'm looking intently. I almost need a pair of glasses, but I'm looking intently. I'm using a pair of real sharp little pruners here, so I can get in there and get real precise cuts. And I'm also removing crowding, and so if there's duplication, where there's a branch that is conflicting with another one, I'm taking it off. And I'm also trying to promote ramification. Now when I say ramification, it's getting the branches to spread out in a fan shape. And to do that, you want to leave the little branchlets that are going out this way at 45-degree angles. Remove the ones that are going up, the ones that are going down, and maybe the ones that are in the middle. If there's like 3 like this, you remove that one and you leave, well, my fingers don't work too well on that, but if you've got some like that, you'll remove this, and maybe leave these guys so they spread out. So that's, you get the ramification and the layering, and you establish planes. So that means I've got to go through each branch, and this is a very tedious process. And as a tree service arborist, owner of a tree service, be honest with you, most people do not want to spend the money that's necessary to do this kind of fine quality work. They just want their pine trees to look good, and have somebody come in every couple years and prune them out if you're lucky. In the situation of the job that I'm on, this client is really into bonsai. He's really into the Japanese style of pruning, and he's got expensive bonsais in pots around here, and he's got 9 of these pine trees, and he wants them to be pruned out properly, and I'm doing my best to try to do justice to these beautiful trees. So I'm going to cut this off because there's no buds on this, so it's going to die, and I don't see any. Now there is a bud back there. I'll leave it on. I'll leave there. There's a little bud right there, a little tiny guy. You almost need glasses, so I will leave that there. Here's a bud. I'm going to cut this. This is all dead out here. I'm going to cut it back to that bud right there, a little bud right on there. To be honest with you, there aren't places you can go to learn how to do this. They're very few and far between. There's certainly none in my area, and so we just learn and do the best that we can to try to learn from books, by watching videos, by trial and error, by visiting Japanese gardens and studying how the masters do it. So the branchlets that I was doing before were on the lower part of the tree, and they were kind of going out more laterally. Now when we get to the upper part of the tree, I'm going to be more conscientious about pruning them up rather than out or kind of down a little bit. Not really down, but down and up, but more out. These I want to prune more up. They're going out, but they're going up. Why? Because all the trees are phototropic. They grow toward the light, and so things need to be growing upward because all these candles are reaching for the light. And so the Japanese style of pruning is replicating nature, which has the branches and the needles are up. So basically, because they're reaching for the light, so they're growing toward the light. So as branches get older, they tend to droop. They get heavy and droop. And that gives the appearance of age and maturity. But then at the same time, on these drooping branches, and often weights will be put on the branches rocks tied with rope, or they will be tied down to stakes in the ground or to other things, to other branches, to give them a drooping look, while at the same time the needles are pruned, and the little branchlets on the ends of the branch are pruned upward. So you get this down and up. So it's kind of like if my arm is a branch with needles on the end, or a branchlets, the arm will be down and the branch will be down, and the needles, like my fingers, will be pointing up. So that's what I'm focusing on here. And again, I'm looking for removing branches that are not little branchlets that do not have buds on them, because they're just going to be a dead end. Nothing's going to come out of that. And then I'm removing often the central ones to promote ramification. So the central leaders, the tall leaders, often come out. Tall leaders, I mean the tall candles, often they come out, and I'll leave one on either side so they can kind of come up like a upside down octopus, if you will. And I'm also still trying to separate out different clumps, one from another. And once in a while I will leave a dead branch, just because sometimes if it's a really nice dead branch in the right spot, you prune it out, maybe make kind of carve it a little bit so it looks like it was broken off, maybe in a windstorm or something, and that can give it a real, it's called a jin in bonsai, and that can give a sense of age and maturity, like the tree's been around a while. It's got some natural wounds on it. But anyway, scars from age, and so it's sort of like a patina. So that's not bad. And often too, we'll take off some of the needles, because again, that some of these needles are old, but you don't want to take off too many needles, because the tree needs needles, because the needles, food is stored in the needles. But it's plant food, plant energy. But we'll take off some of these needles so you can see the individual. You see the branches, if they're stripped of needles, there's again more definition, and it looks more like a mature tree. If you leave lots of needles on it, down lower on the stems, then the tree looks young. It looks younger, and but we want to give the appearance of age. So if we separate out, remove some of these needles in between some of the branches, especially in the crotches of these little branchlets, can actually make it look, give it a little more a mature, aged look. So again, I'm knocking out the dead needles, cutting out the dead branches, and I'm separating the elements, and I am removing longer candles in favor of shorter ones, and that way you get the bonsai look. We got a layer here, a layer here, and a layer there. You've got ramification, and things are spreading out. That's a very nice look. Now I'm going to come up here and do that branch. So we're getting some definition here in this tree, where you can see some separation between the elements, which is kind of cool. Knocking out the dead needles as I go. Yeah, kind of separate things out a little bit so it's not so crowded. That's another aspect of Japanese pruning is simplicity, austere, beauty, but a certain austerity, but naturalness at the same time. So I'm going to cut this branch off right here, this little guy, because we've got a beautiful little branch back here, and I want to open up the view. See that? I want to open up the view so you can see that. That way you get more of a 3D look. And then I'm going to come in here and prune this out. I pulled out my Felcos for that bigger branch, and I'm going to go back to my little pruners. So I'm going to cut some of these branches because I want to get some planes, some layers. So like I cut this one off in between because I want this this plane here, this layer, I wanted it to be separate from this down here. And I'm going to actually cut this little guy off too, because you want to leave some open spaces in between. That adds to the beauty and the simplicity. And sometimes I've got some wire down here, and if there's a branch that's not growing the way I want it, I will actually wire it. So there are a number of aesthetic principles that one has to keep in mind when they're pruning. You can read all the books that you want and learn all the various aesthetic principles that go into Japanese style pruning, but it's not until you get out there and begin to work with those principles and integrate them, and then they become intuitive, and it becomes an expression of the artist where he or she is just doing it intuitively, automatically. And I've been pruning intuitively since I was a child, working on the family farm and the family nursery and in the family landscaping business. And I really started on apple trees. That's how I started, was pruning apple trees on the family farm, and then pruning them for the neighbors who found out I knew how to prune apple trees. And so they'd hire me starting when I was 13 to prune apple trees. And so I learned at an early age that if you prune an apple tree, for example, this is one example, if you prune an apple tree properly, you can prune it to optimize for fruit production, but also you can make it beautiful at the same time. There's no reason that I'm going to cut that whole thing off there. There's no reason that aesthetic pruning and pruning for health and vitality, and in the case of an apple tree, for fruit production, if you are good, you can achieve all three goals at the same time. And I learned to do that, and it became intuitive. So my training ground was apple trees. I have applied that principle into all of my pruning, whether it's large trees or small trees, all the way down to bonsai.